The moment my mother stood at the head of the Christmas table and told 30 relatives that I either had to pay for my younger sister's dream wedding or lose my family forever, I realized I had never truly been loved for who I was. I had only been valued for what I could do for everyone else. They thought I would quietly reach for my checkbook like I always reached for every family problem. They had no idea that one hidden email would destroy the story they had spent months building against me. My name is Lauren Carter, and I am 33 years old. I work as an intensive care nurse in North Carolina. Every day I take care of strangers during the hardest moments of their lives, but nothing prepared me for what my own family would do to me. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. My mother had spent almost 4 decades talking about the wedding she never had. She married my father in a simple courthouse ceremony with no celebration, and that disappointment slowly became an obsession. She convinced herself that one day her daughters would give her the perfect wedding she had always dreamed about. I was the oldest daughter, the dependable one. I put myself through nursing school without asking anyone for help. After graduation, I worked long overnight shifts, often missing birthdays, holidays, and weekends because patients needed me. Somewhere along the way, I became the family problem solver. I picked up my mother's prescriptions every month because she refused to change pharmacies. I filed my father's taxes every year because he never understood them. I was my grandmother's emergency contact, which meant countless late-night drives whenever she became sick or fell at her assisted living center. Every holiday dinner, every family gathering, every turkey and casserole somehow became my responsibility. Nobody forced me at first. They simply learned that if they waited long enough, I would take care of everything. My younger sister Emily lived a very different life. She was cheerful, outgoing, and much closer to her mother than I ever was. When she became engaged to a successful businessman named Ryan, everyone celebrated. Ryan's parents welcomed her into their family with open arms. They owned several successful businesses and clearly had far more money than we did, but they never acted superior. They simply wanted their son and future daughter-in-law to have a beautiful wedding. That was when everything changed. My mother threw herself into planning the ceremony with unbelievable excitement. She toured expensive venues, hired decorators, chose luxury flowers, and talked about live entertainment instead of a simple DJ. By the time she finished calculating everything, the wedding budget had reached almost $90,000. My parents had only saved $15,000. I asked the obvious question, where's the rest of the money coming from? Nobody answered me. Instead, strange comments began appearing during family dinners. My mother reminded everyone how responsible I was with money. She talked about how I had no husband or children, so my expenses must be lower. My father never directly agreed with her, but he never disagreed either. Every conversation left me with an uncomfortable feeling I could not explain. Everything became clear at Thanksgiving. While I was washing dishes, Emily casually told me that Ryan's parents had offered to pay for the entire wedding. I smiled because I thought that solved everything. Then she told me our mother had refused. I stared at her in disbelief. Emily shrugged and said I earned good money, had no family of my own, and could easily help cover the wedding instead. She called it simple math. Those words hurt more than I expected. My entire life had been reduced to a bank account simply because I was single. I quietly grabbed my keys and drove home without saying goodbye. December arrived with exhausting hospital shifts and endless overtime. I barely had enough energy to sleep, yet I still spent my only days off shopping for Christmas presents and preparing most of the holiday dinner. I bought thoughtful gifts for everyone because despite everything, they were still my family. I roasted a huge turkey, prepared homemade side dishes, and drove 45 minutes to my parents' house believing we would enjoy Christmas together. Instead, I walked straight into an ambush. Dinner had almost ended when my mother stood and tapped her fork against her wine glass. Every conversation stopped. She smiled at everyone before looking directly at me. She announced that Emily's wedding would cost $90,000. Then, she proudly explained that our family expected me to pay the remaining $75,000. I honestly thought I had misunderstood. When I quietly asked if she was serious, she nodded without hesitation. Then she gave me the ultimatum. Either pay for your sister's wedding or consider yourself no longer part of this family. The room became completely silent. I looked around at 30 relatives hoping someone would say she had gone too far. Nobody spoke. Then my father stood beside her and calmly announced that everyone agreed this responsibility belonged to me. That sentence hurt even more than my mother's demand. I slowly stood, folded my napkin, picked up my coat, and said only one word, no. Then I walked out. The drive home felt endless. I cried the entire way because I had finally realized that years of sacrifice meant absolutely nothing. I had cooked the meal they had just eaten, bought the gifts sitting under their tree, and spent years taking care of everyone without asking for anything in return. Yet somehow I had become the selfish one because I refused to finance someone else's wedding. The harassment began before I even reached my apartment. My phone filled with calls from my mother, father, sister, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Every day the number increased. Some begged, others yelled. Several accused me of destroying the family. By New Year's Day I had received 120 phone calls in a single day. Instead of arguing, I documented everything. Working in intensive care had taught me that accurate records often matter more than emotional conversations. I logged every missed call, every voicemail, and every text message inside a notebook. Then something unexpected happened. Ryan's mother contacted me privately and asked if we could meet for coffee. When we sat down, she quietly slid her phone across the table. On the screen was an email exchange. Months before Christmas, she and her husband had offered to pay every penny of the wedding expenses as a gift to the happy couple. My mother had refused. Even worse, she had replied that I would personally cover the remaining costs. She had promised away my money without ever speaking to me. I read the email 3 times before saving copies everywhere I could. At that moment I understood everything. This had never been about money. It was about control. If Ryan's parents paid, they would naturally help make wedding decisions. My mother wanted complete authority over every detail, so she rejected their generosity and secretly volunteered my income instead. A few weeks later, one of my aunts organized another family meeting inside a church fellowship hall. The same relatives who had watched me leave on Christmas gathered once again. My mother immediately repeated that I was selfish for refusing to help my sister. This time I did not walk away. Instead, I calmly listed everything I had done for the family during the previous 10 years. I reminded them about every prescription pickup, every tax return, every midnight drive to help my grandmother, every holiday meal, every financial sacrifice, and every hour I had given them without expecting anything back. The room slowly became silent. Then I reached into my pocket and unfolded the printed email. I read every word aloud. The offer from Ryan's parents, my mother's rejection, and the sentence promising that I would pay for the wedding. Gasps spread throughout the room. My sister looked completely shocked because she had never known the truth. My father admitted he had seen the email months earlier and had urged my mother to accept the offer, but he confessed he had stayed quiet because he was afraid of upsetting her. For the first time in my life, my mother had no answer. She accused me of exposing private family business, but nobody supported her anymore. Everyone finally understood that she had created the entire conflict herself. I stood and looked directly at her. I told her I loved my family, but I would never allow anyone to bully me into buying acceptance. I reminded everyone that love is freely given, not purchased with a $75,000 check. Then I walked over to my grandmother. She smiled proudly, squeezed my hand, and whispered that she had never been more proud of me. A week later my sister called. She apologized for treating my life like simple math. She admitted she had allowed our mother to manipulate her and said Ryan's parents were still willing to host the wedding. For the first time in weeks, I believed our relationship might actually heal. Eventually my mother called too. Her apology was awkward and incomplete, but it was more honest than anything she had said before. She admitted she believed I should always carry the burden because I had always been the strong one. I finally understood something important. Being strong does not mean allowing people to use you. Several months later, the wedding took place at Ryan's family lake house instead of the extravagant venue my mother had planned. Wildflowers replaced luxury centerpieces, close friends replaced hundreds of unnecessary guests. The celebration was warm, joyful, and filled with genuine love instead of expensive decorations. For the first time in years, I attended a family gathering without organizing the food, solving every problem, or carrying everyone else's responsibilities. I simply arrived, celebrated my sister, and enjoyed the day. As the sun set over the lake, my father quietly handed me a handwritten note. It simply said that he should have defended me sooner and hoped it was not too late to become a better father. I folded the note and slipped it into my purse. Some wounds never completely disappear, but they can finally stop controlling your life. That Christmas taught me something I will never forget. The people who truly love you never send you an invoice for belonging. They never measure your worth by your bank account or your willingness to sacrifice everything for them. Real family offers support without conditions, accepts kindness without pride, and never mistakes control for love. The most powerful word I spoke that entire year was also the shortest. No. It cost me months of heartbreak, hundreds of phone calls, and the painful truth about the people closest to me. But in the end, saying no did not destroy my family. It simply exposed who had been breaking it all along.